Hello and welcome back to the OTB channel. I'm doing a little bit of a revisit look at a distro today. Some time ago I had a look at MX Linux and I was really impressed with the distro itself. I thought it was a little plain looking, but generally speaking it's full of Debian stable goodness, and I found nothing to really criticise it for. And they recently released the latest version, MX-19 patito. I'm not sure if I have that right. Apparently in English that means ugly duckling, which I think is a little bit harsh. It's always been quite plain, but I think MX has always been a very, very functional system, and it has deserved its popularity. It uses the XFCE desktop, but it's themed by the MX developers, and it has a set of tools which distinguish it and make it slightly different from a plain Debian install. It feels to me very much like the old Mepis distro used to be, in terms of the little extras that it adds. So I thought, why not do a brief, quick look at this update to see if there's anything that stands out. I'm not going to go through everything in detail like I did with the first review. My first review is still up if you'd like to have a look at it. But by all means, let's have a look at this and see what's changed. If we start first of all by looking at the release notes. It was released on the 21st of October, so yes, I'm a few weeks beyond that, I know. And it's now, in fact, I'm just switching over to Distro Watch. It's now tied into Debian Buster, which is great. Patito Feo. In English, Ugly Duckling, and it's also a comedy TV series for kids and teens from Argentina. Okay, so what's actually changed? Well, the latest updates from Debian Buster, the Antics and the MX repos. It's using XFCE 4.14, updated GIMP, Mesa, firmware, the latest Debian kernel 4.19, and a patched sudo. It includes Firefox, VLC, Clementine, Thunderbird, and the whole of LibreOffice, and much more in the MX repositories. It does, however, from memory, come fairly well loaded. It uses its own installer, the Gazelle installer. I found it a little clunky the last time I used it, but apparently it's been fixed now in terms of auto mounting and partitioning, and there's a whole range of other fixes, including new wallpaper artwork. So, okay, all good. Well, I think the next thing we can do is just go and have a look at what it's like. So you should see in front of you now my copy of VirtualBox. And you'll see that I've got two entries in it, MX Linux and MX Linux install. I've already installed a version of this and had a little play with it, and I'm doing a copy just for the installation. It helps to speed things up. Just to run through some of the settings that I've got here, I've set it to 8 meg of RAM. I've given it 2 threads of my i5 processor. On the display, it's just got the standard 16 meg of RAM. I've enabled 3D acceleration, and over the last few reviews, I've actually been choosing the newer VBox SVGA graphics controller. In terms of storage, I've created a 32 meg virtual hard drive. I've got the MX 64 ISO attached to VirtualBox. I've disabled audio for the time being, and I've got networking set up in bridged mode. just in case anybody's not sure what that is, it gives it an IP that's part of your network, and so essentially the operating system just acts as if it's another computer on your network rather than a virtual machine. So last time I tested this, I didn't actually boot it in UEFI mode. I played around with it a little bit before recording the video, but I had a few problems getting it to install in UEFI mode. They've updated the installer, so this time I thought, well, why not? Let's go the full UEFI and see what happens. So let's press start and see where we get to. It's gone to my other screen, of course, so let me bring it over here and you can see exactly where we are. Okay, so for some reason it defaults to the second entry, customized boot with text menus. I don't know if that's something to do with booting it in UEFI mode, but that's fine. And we get this nice little text installation screen. I am guessing it defaults to this because of the UEFI, but it's simple enough to operate. What language do we want? Well, English UK is 13, so if I type 13 and enter. Console columns, I've no idea, so I'm just going to go with the default. I'm going to type 1. Time zones, I'm going to pick London, which is 23. What do I want to set it to? The hardware clock, I want local, so I'm going to pick 11. And what do I do there? Persistence option, I'm just going to go with the default. Font size, I'm just going to go with the default. And it's now running the live scripts. UDEV is done, and we'll wait and see what happens. Well, no problem there. It might have booted in text mode, but it seems to have booted without too much of a problem. Whoops. I always seem to have problems moving the virtual screen around without first moving the settings page. Okay, I'm just going to close down the initial launch page now, and I'm going to go into settings to see if we can redo the resolution a little bit. So if we go to settings, oops, a little bit fiddly in this resolution. Where are we? Display, configure display. It's on 800 by 600 at the moment, but I'm pleased to see 1920 by 1080 is there as an option. Let's apply it and see what happens. Okay, so it seems to have gone into that with no problem. Let me just put this into full screen mode. You know, I have to say, as you know, I put quite a few distros through their paces when it comes to installation and launching live CDs. This is pretty painless to get the right resolution right from the word go. It's in full HD straight away, and it was painless. Clearly the VirtualBox guest editions are already installed. I'm not going to talk too much about the look and feel at the moment, other than to say I like what I'm looking at. It's got a much fresher feel than from the previous version, but we'll talk about that when we look at the system after installation. So let's go for installation by clicking the icon on the desktop called the installer. I'm going to be really interested here to see if it picks up that we are indeed in UEFI mode. Right, well, it's already picked GB as the layout and PC 105 for the keyboard, so that's all correct. We'll hit next. I'm not going to do a manual install here. I'm going to try and see what it does automatically. And so it's got auto install using entire disk at the moment. Let's stick with that and click next. OK to format, yes, absolutely. Install Grub for Linux and Windows. for Linux and Windows. Yeah, sure, why not? And it's picking the ESP partition for the location. So it's already clearly seen that this is in UEFI mode, which I'm very impressed about. Let's click next. It's set the computer name. I'm just going to leave everything as standard there. United Kingdom is already set. Time zone is already set. System clock uses local. Okay, let's click that and click next. And we get to set the username. So OTB, default password. And we'll move down and set a password for root. Do I want to show passwords? No, I don't. Do I want to auto log in? No, I'd prefer to log in manually. Save live desktop changes. We don't need to do that because we're installing a real system. So I'll just click next. And away it goes. It's copying the new system. I'm going to pause this for a moment. I'll come back once we're done. The time at the moment is 4 minutes past 1. So let's see how long it takes. Okay, so it's 7 minutes past 1 and the installation has finished. So literally 3 minutes since I started it or finished my interaction with the installer. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to manually shut down the system. I'm going to reboot into the system I've already installed and installed updates on, and we'll take a look around. So here we are on the installed system, which was again painless launching this. It booted straight into 1080 mode without a problem. And the first thing that I would say is that compared to the previous version, I like the look and feel. It's probably just about the wallpaper, but nevertheless, the impression that it gives, I much prefer. I think I said last time, I'm not a big fan of Conky generally, but being placed there in the top right-hand corner, just with the time and date, it's fairly unobtrusive. I could live with that. Let's just have a brief look at the system. I did this to death the last time, so this is just going to be a quick overview as much as anything else. Let's go to desktop settings and see what wallpaper has been added. Okay, there's quite a selection there. I'm just scrolling through very, very quickly. That one is pretty much, well, it's slightly different from the previous version. A leather grain, but it kind of keeps the system color features that we were used to with MX. Oh, I quite like that. That's quite nice looking. What about this one? A little bit more colourful? Not for me, but it might be for you. Let's have a look. A nice plain grey if you don't like too much colour on your desktop. What about this one? I quite like a flash of colour, but I think that might be a little bit too much for me. Okay, that's quite nice. So there's plenty to choose from. I think I'm probably going to stick with this one, which is nice, clean lines with a little bit of colour just to make it more interesting. So first impressions, I really like the look and feel. We have, as normal, the manual. I think this is a real bonus. Having an actual manual for reference is a great idea, and I really wish more distros did it. We also have an FAQ, which just gives us an overview of MX itself, security, the system itself. Okay, So a couple of frequently asked questions. For some reason, and I don't know why, the launch screen hasn't actually appeared this time. Let's just see if we can find this. I don't know what it's called, to be honest. I can't see it automatically just by typing the word launch, but we'll no doubt come across it. We've got the whisker menu, and if we go to recently used, you'll see what I've just played around with very briefly. Into accessories, you've got a Conky Manager there, which I went through last time. Midnight Commander installed by default, which is great. You've got a screenshot application. You've got a task manager. Let's have a look at what that is. Okay, so you can kill an application should you need to. G calculator, I saw down there. Or calculator, should I say. A backup facility. And Thunar File Manager. I've always liked Thunar. In terms of development, they've got Genie and an icon browser, and even a few games for you. Mahjong. I've played that a few times. What about graphics? Well, the first thing is GIMP is installed by default, which is great. I've no idea what Nomax is. A free open source image viewer, okay, and Simple Scan. We have Firefox installed by default, along with Thunderbird and also Transmission for your BitTorrents. HexChat if you like IRCs. GNOME dial-up tool. Do you know, we sort of take it as read these days that we're all on broadband, but I suppose not everyone across the world is, so it's useful to have that there. What about multimedia? Well, you've got ALSA Mixer there. A graphical MTP client for MP3 players, CD Ripper, Clementine, GUVC View for your webcam, and of course VLC, which I think is an essential program for any sort of Linux distro. We then have MX Tools. Let's open this up from the menu actually. This initially would seem to be pretty much the standard XFCE settings, with all the things plus extras that you would normally see. But you have an icon there separately for MX Tools, which has some nice little applications on it. You have a live USB maker there, a chroot rescue scan. Okay. I'm presuming that allows you to go into a chroot environment. You have a menu editor, your user manager. You can set your boot options here. You can set your bash configuration, aliases and theming. If you've got an NVIDIA card, this is where you would go. You can install your codecs from here, multimedia codecs. Change details of desktop system monitor. Let's just open that up and see what it gives us. Okay, it's the positioning and the colour more than anything else. Your system sounds, a tweak tool. What's the tweak tool for? It's the panel. Where do you want the panel to be? Left or right, and along the bottom or along the top. Let's just stick it on the top and see how easy that works. I presume. There we go. Apply. And it seems to have applied without too much of a problem. We can set our themes in here. We can choose our compositor. You can choose Compton if you prefer. And reset Light DM or reset Thunar custom right-click actions. Okay. What else have we got? The standard stuff and a package installer. Now, MX does include Synaptic Package Manager, which I really like. But I do quite like this approach as well. It's not like a software store. And I tend not to use software stores, but it just has some fairly simple tabs along the top. What do you want to install from the stable repo? You're about to use the MX test repository, whose packages are providing for testing purposes only. Okay, so it's updating the cache. We can go to backports from here. We'll just let it update and then we'll move on. And also, if you want to install Flatpaks, completely up to yourself, we actually have an option here. And it says MX Linux includes this repository of Flatpaks for the user's convenience only, and it is not responsible for the functionality of the individual Flatpaks themselves. Okay, let's just wait for that to update itself. As this is a stable repository based distro, in other words stable Debian, some of the apps you may be looking for might not be quite as new as you would prefer. But having the ability to install Flatpaks as conveniently as this means that I could, for instance, if I went for OBS Studio, will it find that? Remote Hub, Flat Hub, how strange. OBS Studio hasn't shown up. I know it exists in the Flat Hub remote repo, but okay, fine. It's a minor thing. Right, so I quite like it. I like the menu. I like the Whisker menu. I like XFCE anyway, but I think that what MX does with it is great. And I'm obviously not alone, because it's still at the top of the charts as far as distro watch is concerned. Not that that necessarily means anything, but it is an indication of just how popular this distro is. So this update, is it worth it? Well, I think the functionality of MX is pretty much what it was before. It's had a few additional frills added. The installer just feels a lot smoother and a lot less tricky when you're running through it. I really like the way that it didn't struggle at all with a UEFI install, and that it automatically set everything up. In fact, let me just see if I can open. Alt-Control-T will just bring up a terminal. I just want to have a look at the F-stab and see what's there. And okay, everything's pretty standard there. It's set up on the automatic option. ext4 system for root. It's set up the ESP partition in boot/EFI, which is pretty standard. And it has actually set up a swap partition as well. So, not a lot more to say about this without going through absolutely everything, which I've already done. Please go and have a look at my last review. Is the update worth it? Well, I prefer the look, but I'm aware that might just be wallpaper, and I love some of the wallpapers that come with the system. But it feels very solid and very stable. So, good job, MX. So that's MX-19. I'm struggling to find something to criticise this for. It installed flawlessly, even though I'd set VirtualBox in UEFI mode. Interestingly enough, I kept trying to shut it down and reboot to generate the VirtualBox UEFI error, and it never happened. So I don't know whether to put that down to VirtualBox or just down to the way that MX has been configured, but all good either way. It comes with the guest editions. It did default to the text installer at the start, but I have no real problem with that. If that's what it has to do to ensure a smooth UEFI installation, so be it. It looks a lot fresher than it used to. I liked the look and feel, but I felt it was quite plain in its colour schemes before. Just for me, aesthetically, I think it's an improvement. It seems snappy. I like the whisker menu. I do like XFCE. It won't move aside my default Mate desktop, but I do like XFCE. So another star, I think, for MX, and one that I'm sure will only attract more fans. I said last week, I talked a little bit about installing Arch as someone brand new to Linux, and I would stick by my comments that if you really want to get down and dirty with the system right from the word go, Arch is a great distro. However, if you're not quite that confident, MX is a great option. It's based on Debian stable, so you're not going to go far wrong with that. If I was moving back now from Arch to something else, well, I use Debian stable anyway. Could I live with MX? Absolutely I could. I really like it. The only downside for me is it defaults to XFCE, but it's configured in such a way that it's a long way from ugly. So that's all I've really got to say today. By the way, just before I finish, you will have seen that I've tried a new graphical introduction to replace my rather busy one. Appreciate your comments about whether or not you like it. It's a little quieter and perhaps more peaceful. Anyway, see you next week. I hope you enjoyed that video. Below you'll see a couple of links to other videos that I've recorded, and please click the logo button to subscribe to the channel. It really helps.